Sally, hardly a day goes by that President Obama or some Republican candidate for the presidency doesn't announce an event of some kind in Florida. Why is that?
Everybody wants to campaign near the beach. They want to be in Florida. Now, Florida is very important both in the context of a Republican primary this year and also a general election. I mean, we're a huge state, probably 11.5 million potential voters, and we're a state that is a microcosm of the nation. In the context of a primary calendar for the Republicans, we are the first primary that is a large primary representative of so many different types of voters, a very diverse primary electorate. And people have begun to say, as Florida goes, so goes the nation. So I think our voters will be followed very closely. We also have a significant Hispanic population that will be the definitive swing vote, I think, in this potential, in this election cycle.
A lot of people, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, there's still a little bit of uncertainty of when the primary is going to be, but we know it's going to be earlier probably than it ever has been. And then just add 2 more electoral votes than we've ever had before, and that says a lot.
Scriven, some say that Florida might be the earliest big swing state primary. Could that have a big impact?
Oh, I think it has a huge impact. I mean, I agree with everything Sally said. I mean, as Florida, and we have history of that with Clinton and Carter and Bush. I mean, as Florida goes, many times the presidency goes. And so you see Huntsman opening up a headquarters here and Romney agreeing to 2 debates here already. So, I mean, it's going to be ground zero in many ways.
Mike, President Obama, in a recent poll at the end of May, the Quinnipiac University poll, had an approval rating in Florida of around 52%. Of course, polls go up and down. Does that mean much at this point in Florida, and can he take Florida?
I think he, yes, can take Florida. It will depend again on the forces that came out last time coming out for him again. It will depend on some of that registration effort that occurred in '08 has to occur again, because he only won Florida by 250,000 votes, which is not very many when you look at the number of votes that are cast. So he's going to have his work cut out for him, but I think he will work very hard to duplicate what he did 4 years ago.
Go ahead,
I was just going to add to that. The economy is going to drive this election in Florida. I mean, not unlike other states, where the economy is on Election Day is going to be very important to Barack Obama, because if people ask the question, are we better off than we were 4 years ago, and they're not better off, that is a problem. There's not a lot of time to go to get this thing turned around. So if I were the Obama team, I would be very concerned about re-energizing that team that they had in place. They did run a very effective campaign last time. I think the most effective campaign by a Democrat at the grassroots level that Florida's ever seen. So if he can turn that on again, it's going to be a problem for Republicans.
Scriven, I had a figure here that I think would disturb the president and probably any incumbent. This was a national figure. It wasn't a Florida figure from Real Clear Politics. It said, it asked voters about their feelings about whether the country was moving in the right direction or not. And 29%, and this is as of today, as we speak, say we're not going in the right direction, and 64% say, no, 29%, I'm sorry, say we're going in the right direction, and 64% say we're going in the wrong direction. That can change, of course, but if the election were held today, how would that impact President Obama's chances for re-election?
You know, Steve, those are disturbing numbers. What I've seen in looking at those same numbers, though, is they're blaming everybody. They're blaming Congress. They're blaming the state legislators. They're blaming governors. I mean, our governor here has the worst numbers of any governors in the United States. They're mad at everybody. They want to listen to what people have to say. They want to listen to what their plans are for making this economy, as Sally mentioned, you know, jobs in the economy. And I think right now we don't know who that opposition to the president's going to be. But those are disturbing numbers for Republicans, for Democrats, for everybody, and it's really going to end up, you know, being what they're talking about in 2012 that is going to get the people's attention. And I think I agree with everything that Mike and Sally have said. It's going to be close. It's probably going to be late breaking. It's going to depend on where the economy is. But I think, you know, those are disturbing numbers for everybody, not just the president.
Let's talk for a moment about the Republican side of the race and Florida and nationally. Sally, let me start with you. You had a lot of experience in Republican politics and national Republican politics. My goodness, what a field. It just keeps going, and I'm not sure we have a completed field yet. But let me go back to Real Clear Politics as we speak and run down the list of candidates. Some of them haven't even announced, and the numbers. Right now, Governor Romney is at 25%. We've got Sarah Palin at 16%, Giuliani at 11%, Kaine at 9%, Gingrich at 7%, Ron Paul at 7%, Bachmann at 6%, Pawlenty at 5%, Perry, the governor of Texas, hasn't announced, he's at 5%, Santorum at 4%, and Huntsman, who just announced, at 1%. My good, that's all over the place. Nobody's got 30%. Just give me some feelings that you have about those national numbers, and is anybody moving in Florida?
It is a really interesting, fluid situation right now. I mean, can you remember a time when we did not really have a front runner on, in the Republican primary field in the past? Usually you have someone, a vice president, someone who's run before. In this case, Mitt Romney occupies that space. He is the best known of the candidates running on the Republican side. In Florida, he has the best fundraising infrastructure, and that's important and will continue to be important because Florida has 10 media markets, plus a Hispanic media market, very expensive state in which to run a campaign. But the problem is he doesn't yet have the confidence of the electorate. So you see people who are much less known getting in the race, like a John Huntsman, two-term governor of Utah. His wife is from Orlando. He's planting the flag in Florida, as Screven said, and running his campaign out of Orlando. Rick Perry created quite a stir, I think, last weekend in New Orleans at a Republican leadership conference. He's the governor of Texas. You see a lot of people still making a stir here, and it's just such a fluid situation. As Mike said, it's so early. We really have no idea who the nominee will be.
I'm reminded of the 1978 governor's race, and Bob Shevin had 70% name recognition in May following the legislative session before the primary. Bob Graham had 4%. And look who won.
I remember that well.
You do, don't you?
What's going to happen here, though, and this is why I do agree that with Mike that the president's in the best shape right now because he can talk about the issues and talk about jobs and the economy. This group of Republican nominees, they did a good job in New Hampshire about not going after each other, but that's going to change. You've had Pawlenty already going after Romney on health care, calling it the Obama health care plan. You have Huntsman, who announced today or yesterday that worked for Obama and said that he was in favor of his health care plan and said he was a great leader. You have, Perry from Texas, which I'm not sure the country's ready for another nominee from the state of Texas after Bush. So at some point, they're going to turn on each other. And when they do, I think it's going to get ugly. I think Sally's right. Money will drive this for a while, but I think you really are going to see a rough and tumble primary, and that can only benefit the president, who can continue to talk about jobs and the economy.
Up to a point, but just one quick thing to interject. Republicans will be united when there's a nominee because Obama is so incredibly unpopular among Republicans. So whether the nominee is Mitt Romney or Rick Perry or Tim Pawlenty, at the end of the day, I think there'll be plenty of time for Republicans to talk about the issues and run an effective campaign against the president.
Plenty of time, plenty of money. What I would think would be interesting if Romney were the nominee, he'd be on the ballot with an amendment that said repeal health care. And they'd be talking about his support of health care, yet they're repealing it in Florida potentially. So we're trying to repeal
Let's move.
That.
We've got a couple of minutes left in this segment. I want to hear you talk a little bit about the race for the United States Senate. In that Quinnipiac poll near the end of May, the incumbent, Democrat Bill Nelson, actually had a pretty high approval rate, including among Republicans. I think it was like 52 with about 52% Democrat approval ratings, 52% approval rating, and 40% that did not approve. But he had a very high approval rating among Republicans. Screven, is he vulnerable in your opinion or not at this point in time?
Well, going back to what I said earlier, I think any incumbent with the national feeling about the country going in the wrong direction are vulnerable, except Bill Nelson connects with voters. We've talked about this in previous shows. He's a hard campaigner, and he's been out there fighting for issues that Florida, over the last year, the oil spill, helping get compensation from BP, the train that he was fighting our governor on that was shovel-ready with thousands of jobs ready to go. Nelson was leading the charge to try to work out a deal to get the train and the jobs that went along with that. NASA, he's been working very hard to work on as NASA shifts from the shuttle program to handle keeping jobs in Florida. Those are the things people care about. On the other side, again, I would liken that to the Republican primary. There's no front runner. You're going to have a nasty primary, and I think that only helps Bill Nelson's chances.
Sally, talk about the Republican primary, some of the major players there. We've got the Senate President, Mike Herodopoulos. We have Adam Hasner, the former majority leader of the House. We've got former Senator, forgot the name there.
George Lemieux.
George Lemieux, I'm sorry. And somebody that's recently jumped in from Orlando.
Like as Screven said, the primary field on the Republican presidential front, the primary field for the Senate race is very fluid right now. Not many of the candidates, if any, are well known among Republican voters. And recently, a man by the name of Mike McAllister, a retired Army colonel who lives in Tampa, I think now, and has a tree farm, has created quite a stir with the speech he gave at the Republican Leadership Conference last weekend among Republicans. The question remains, can he raise the funds needed to be competitive? Adam Hasner, very articulate, well-liked Republican, former member majority leader from South Florida. George Lemieux, also
with a very well-connected wife who can raise lots of money, Hasner's.
George Lemieux, former senator and an aide to Governor Christ, who's from Broward, a very important part of the state, and Mike Herodopoulos, who's been an effective Senate president and leader. I think it still remains to be seen because these candidates just don't have the name recognition who will be the front runner in that race, and it may be heavily dependent on their ability to raise funds.
Remember, McAllister got 10% of the vote in the Republican primary for governor.
Right.
And no one had heard of him, and he had no television, and so it showed that there was something there that connected with the people he was reaching.